productivity, performance activity, like business electricity, results to infinity.
Welcome to Driving Productivity. It's Harjit again. I've got the wonderful Simon Rose with me today. We're in the beautiful northeast of England. Simon, introduce yourself.
Yeah, good to see you again, Hodge. Yeah. I'm a consulting director at SRM. I have got 27 years worth of experience in financial services. Used to work for a bank up here in the northeast for 14 years. Operated right across mortgage lending, contact centers, program transformation, regulation, and I finished up as part of my career leading the senior or part of the senior team for leading the entire branch network, having spent about 11 of the 14 years in the branch network in some shape or form, and much of the last it's nearly 14 years in consulting, actually, but coming up next year.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. Can't quite believe that. It's kind of getting to that level. I've worked with a number of challenger banks and larger banks, building societies across the UK, done a little bit of work for some clients in Europe, and then spent much of the last 4 years helping SRM's clients, go left here, Hodge, helping SRM's clients in the US, so regional banks, community banks, and credit unions, to help improve what they do. And and surprisingly, they're about quite a long time, 13, 14, 15, maybe 20 years, even as much as that, behind the UK in terms of their operations, how they treat customers, technology, all of that kind of stuff. So it's been a really interesting experience the last 4 years.
That's really interesting, actually, because, the US are ahead of the UK in terms of productivity. On this podcast, we talk all things productivity. Great credentials. So you've been there, you've done it, you've worn the T-shirt. You certainly understand productivity. And the UK is lagging behind all of its neighbours, apart from Japan, surprisingly, in productivity. And the whole point of this podcast is really to share real life and learn experiences of productivity. So, away from the theory, sharing what you've learned, what works, what doesn't work. But before we get into that in depth, let's talk about you. What's your thing? Music, cars, reading, theatre. I'm surprised I shouldn't be surprised you touched on music as being the first one. We go back quite a while, Hodge, and I was a professional DJ for 7 years before I started my banking career. And I still love that. I don't go out and do much of that now in public, if any, to be honest. But I still do it as a hobby. Yeah. I just love music, particularly dance music, and turn right, and then I post it up on to platforms like Mixcloud, and hopefully I get a few followers, but probably a bit more successful in my career than my music passion, to be honest. Well, look, I think first of all, it's dance music, is it, or is it soul, or what are you mixing?
I enjoy all types of music, but in terms of mixing and DJing, it's all dance music. So it's a mix of house, tech house, and trance. To be honest, whatever takes my fancy. So
and I remember driving back from Newcastle many a time, listening to your mixes when we worked up in the northeast together some 15 years ago, doing some transformation work.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Anything else? What's the latest movie you've watched?
Latest movie, I think, must be a little while ago now. Family Man, Mark Wahlberg.
Oh, okay.
That is incredibly funny. Yeah, he's good at action, but he's also good at comedy. And we always laugh a minute. Excellent. But here's the grouse. Yeah, we're proper in the country now.
Excellent. Yeah. So let's talk about productivity. it's a big umbrella. It's productivity. I think that there's a lot organisations can do to increase productivity, and increasing productivity, of course, will make a significant difference to UK PLC's revenues. But sometimes I think it's misunderstood, and recent reports have even clarified that there's a literacy gap in terms of productivity. But it's wide and varied. From your experience, is there anything in particular that you think is worth talking about today under that umbrella of productivity?
So it's interesting. Before you get to the meat and bones of what's going on with productivity, for me, it all starts with having that vision, that strategy. So most organizations have a mission of sorts, but do they have a compelling strategy that everybody can get themselves around? So particularly in the type of work that I do, we often talk with clients about what we call line of sight. What we talk about specifically with line of sight is we often put it in metaphorical terms as a telescope.
Yeah.
So if you think telescopes, they've got various lenses in place, to help you see from the small aperture to the big aperture. And if just one of those lenses is out of place, then it skews your view.
Yeah.
So really, in that regard, from a strategy perspective, just keep following the road.
Yeah.
From a strategy perspective, does everybody understand, A, what the company is trying to achieve, what its vision is and the goals? And then does that then follow through down to every part of that organization? Are their goals in alignment to what the organization is trying to achieve? Does everybody understand what their role is within that organization?
So it acts as a binding force, doesn't it, to bring everybody together?
Yeah.
And interestingly, in my experience, sometimes strategy is almost like a tick box exercise, isn't it? It's not. We've done the strategy tick, we've done the vision tick, we've done the mission tick, but actually, making that part of what we do and enabling the workforce to enact that is a real challenge, isn't it?
That's right. Some of the strategies that I've seen have amounted to one page of A4 paper, and it doesn't really say much. Or to the extreme point, businesses have cobbled together some 300 pages, and it's then how do you actually communicate that to the organization? So when you're talking productivity, how do people know what the right thing is that they should be focusing on, what they need to be doing, and what's getting in the way of doing that?
How do you live and breathe it, and how do you communicate that to the separate departments?
Yes.
Usually each department has its own objectives. Those objectives probably have linkages to performance and pay, and somebody's trying to achieve those objectives. Are they joint objectives? Do they bind the business together to meet its purpose? And how well is that purpose understood?
Well, at the level of that purpose and binding everybody together, what are they actually binding together around? We talk about the last podcast that you did around customer journey. A lot of businesses actually don't understand the customer journey. Yes, go left here. When was the last time businesses genuinely actually looked at what they're doing from a customer perspective? In my experience, businesses are typically trying to make things as effective as they possibly can for themselves, rather than thinking about the customer. So it's that purpose, is binding everything together. Am I doing the right thing for the customer? If I'm not, how do we then remove some of those challenges, those roadblocks?
So truly understanding, your customer journey and designing outside in versus inside out, I think, is a key message.
Yes.
And what about purpose? Have you seen that done really badly anywhere?
Well, just coming back to your outside in, inside out view, that's one of the very basic things that I typically tend to look at a starting point. That baseline discovery process for clients. So, what do the pillars look like? How is the organization configured? Looking at how the organization is configured from the customer's standpoint. So, when the customer looks in at the business, how easy is it for them to get things done in the way that they want So how many hands does it have to move through?
Yeah.
Then when you look at the inside out view, how is the organization hierarchically configured in order to help to get the customer to navigate their challenges and their queries and solutions straight through? Just follow this road all the way into Durham.
So I think straight through is really important point because I believe flow is king. Right?
Yes.
It's economy of flow as opposed to economy of scale. Making the workflow efficiently and effectively to meet the purpose is really important. The last podcast I talked about purpose measures method. And purpose. I think a purpose is really hard to define sometimes. So how would you, if you're working with one of the listeners now, how would you go about helping them define purpose?
So, from my perspective, it all stems from what the purpose of the business is, what it's trying to achieve, and then from a local level, who's in charge of the customer experience, and what does that purpose look like across all of the products and services that they have? How do they then piece that through into teams? And I guess it comes back to the great love of things, the Lean Six Sigma days, if you like, all that process mapping. So are the process maps configured in such a way that everybody understands what each part of the business needs to do, and take out from those swim lanes what the purpose actually is for that specific team. And just coming back to the point really that I made earlier is you've got to understand what gets in the way of actually making that flow, as you put it, effective and efficient in order that it gets from one team to the next. But are any parts of those teams, those swim lanes, when you really look hard at the process, redundant? Purposefully, the purpose is to get the customer through the process as effectively as you can. And it might be a box, it might be a form, it might be an individual, but it might be a whole department.
So just to clarify, when we say redundant, we're really talking about removing activity that doesn't add value, so wasteful activity, not people. So productivity is really about doing more with what we have, as opposed to doing more with less.
Yeah, correct. In my experience, a lot of businesses, when they find themselves challenged, their often first go-to point is we need to cut heads.
Yeah,
we need to take headcount out of the business. But actually, when you start looking and examining at the business, is it right to actually do so? So, again, what are the goals of business? How do you then sort of grow, but grow sustainably? So we talk about scalable growth. Have you got the right people in the right roles? Have you got the right roles in the first place? But how do you make what they're doing and their purpose more effective so that you can grow sustainably without adding headcount, but being more effective in revenue generation?
And ensuring that the objectives are aligned as well.
Yes.
That spans from leadership mental models, the vision. Yeah, absolutely. So it's all informed with the vision and the purpose right at the beginning. And would you have just leadership do that, or would you have more than just leadership involved in defining the purpose of the organisation?
So for me, it's the overarching purpose of the organisation is the senior leadership team, that C-suite.
Yeah.
But they need to bring their direct reports into the equation. So it doesn't necessarily need to be everybody on the ground that are doing the roles, but people that are actually leading the teams in order to ensure that purpose, that mission, that vision is fully in alignment.
Yeah.
In order to be as effective around the business as possible. Having said that, some of the individuals within the teams at the ground level are actually closer to what's going on, and they might have really interesting ideas.
Yeah.
And if they're allowed to question, and it's all that what if, or why. Coming back to Simon Sinek and his approach, always start with the why. Why do we do it? Why do we do it like this? But leadership is fundamental to that, because leadership fosters that kind of culture to drive that. And it all comes through performance management. Productivity, you can do so much with processes, process mapping, customer journeys, vision statements, but it's all about connecting the goals to the mission and performance managing against those goals.
So when you say performance managing, is that the process? Is it the people? What would be your focus?
That's a great question. So have they got the right performance management framework in place? Because they may not. They might just have, you've got to do one-to-ones on a monthly basis, but what are you actually trying to achieve out of those one-to-ones? Are people, when they're applying, if we turn right at this roundabout, are people when they're applying for applying that performance management framework, are they actually doing it the right way? Is anybody coaching people on the ground? So it's not just about training leaders to implement the performance management framework, it's coaching them to improve how it's implemented and how they get more out of it. And then it comes back to the view that not a lot of businesses seem to take, in my experience, is who's coaching the coaches? How do the coaches become better coaches?
100%.
To do that. A lot of staff, just want income. They just want salary improvement. That's not strictly true in all cases. Most people want to be developed. Most people want to learn and be better at what they do and be seen to have a career pathway going through it. So again, performance managing people. How do you improve how you actually do that? And to me, that's the secret sauce. Connecting it all, connecting leadership to the vision, the goals, to their team, to be able to get the best from the team to deliver productivity in the right way.
So what I'm hearing is understand your purpose, set a vision, enable that through communication. People talk about leadership storytelling, but I just call it, impassioned belief in what you want to do and sharing that. When people are impassioned, they can share it really well. And I do see large organisations get that very wrong because it's always transmission as opposed to dialogue.
Yes.
So that change dialogue is really important. And then on that performance side of things, people tend to want interesting work that's reasonably challenging, and you don't want them hanging the brains at the door, effectively. But then to support them in the achievement of those activities through coaching, through the right level of support. And I've seen significant productivity improvements when organisations do that well. 20, 25, 30% productivity is quite possible. And that's without the implementation of AI and technology tools. This is really about stuff people can do without significant investment in technology.
It's belief and passion. It's all the leaders communicating what they need to do in the right way that connects the staff, the business, the teams to that vision. And are they creating that positive, passionate environment, that culture to do that? But it's really interesting. So talked a little bit about sort of, some people just go for headcount reduction. Just worked with an organization in the US, and their board have done nothing but say they're too heavy in terms of their staff count. And, we did an exercise that actually proved them to have the right number of staff for what they're doing, but they weren't performing. It was the staff were effectively just waiting for somebody to come in through the door. They weren't asking for the business. They weren't talking to customers or prospects. They were just waiting for that customer or prospect to say, I would like this, before they actually reacted. And that was a problem with strategy. It was a problem with vision. And it was also fundamentally about leadership not connecting with the vision and the performance management approach. And that business didn't see any kind of revenue growth. And I got called to the board to present the findings to the board, and got some interesting reactions.
I can imagine.
Let's say.
Was there a disconnect?
Yes, the board obviously have their eye on performance and and the bottom line, but not understanding necessarily what drives the bottom line. And there needed to be a huge investment in how performance culture and vision is set, but also performance managed. You go left here.
Yep. Just sneak through. Yeah, it's always a challenge, isn't it, with connecting, because leadership have a lot of things that they need to do, and it's really easy to say. I worked with an organisation recently where I needed them to go and walk the floor. So management or leadership by walking the floor. In Lean, it's called Gemba, but really it's going to understand what it is for the workforce to do the work. What's the day in the life look like for Harjit? What are the challenges he faces? What are the dilemmas he has to resolve? And how can I help them with the rules, the policies, the investments? How can I help them serve customers better?
Yes. Yeah. It comes back to me so you can put all those things in place and review policies, improve processes. That we talk a lot, you and I, about continuous improvement. But it's that view. Does everybody in the organisation believe in what we're doing? Do we have passion in serving that customer in the way that the business wants to engage? And that's the fundamental point for starting a productivity journey for me. Have you got that vision and the passion driven through the organisation so that people come in and be as effective as they can day in, day out? And then once you have that, some individuals will start challenging, at least you'd hope so, why they do things in a certain way, because it's interfering with how the customers perceive what they do.
So if I'm a business owner, it could be a small, medium or large business. What are the 2 or 3 things I can start doing tomorrow without any major investment to help put in place some of the things that you've talked about?
So I keep coming back to the point about leadership, but for me it's very simple and it's very cost effective. It doesn't require much investment. Sitting around a table, have we got clarity of the vision and goals that we are trying to achieve, and does everybody in the organisation understand it? Yeah. Walk around the business, ask questions of people. Do they understand what their role is? But more fundamentally than that, do they understand how their role helps the business to achieve its goals? Yeah. Okay. So that could be everybody from an analyst in the finance team to a risk person to a salesperson. Obviously, it's relatively easy. Turn right here and then left at the roundabout. Obviously, for a salesperson, it's easy because it's numbers driven. Are you getting the leads? Are you converting those leads and so on? But for the risk people, people that work in regulation and stuff, what are they actually doing that's stopping the sales guys, being effective at what they're doing? How can they make it easier? But
it's a classic, is that, isn't it? Yes. It's a classic sort of sales versus credit.
Yeah. Business prevention sometimes it gets
called. Business prevention, exactly that.
Yeah.
Am I going right at the roundabout?
Left at the roundabout.
Okay.
Coming back into Durham.
So
that's one thing. Yeah. So clarity and vision. Walk around the business, test people, just have a conversation. Do they understand what they're doing and how it connects to what the business is trying to do? Do they understand their role in helping to achieve that? I'd also come back to that effective coaching point. Not only do you have to be a good coach, and you should have coaching training so that you become a better coach to coach your individuals, but are you actually getting out there and observing what people are doing? So listening to calls, just sitting on the counter at a branch, observing what's going on and the culture and how people are interacting before you start moving into developing, and you should be able to spot very, very quickly what's going on within the business. and what isn't. So, and that comes down to performance management. So, yes, you've got this framework, these goals that you want to achieve. You understand performance management to a certain point, but are you actually, and are your leaders actually implementing performance management in the right way, supported by coaching?
I think one of the other things that's all really easy stuff to do as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if you don't have a coach as a leader, get a coach. It's really important for leaders to be, having something to talk to as well, particularly in small businesses where they could be doing a variety of different jobs. Creating a coaching culture isn't difficult. And one of the best organisations I ever worked for many years ago had a coaching culture, and it was very good. It was nurturing and caring, and we got stuff done, and we had incredibly good service stats as well. So again, that's something that can be done quite easily. And I think that message is absolutely on point about being in the work and understanding the work and how it works. Because
It goes back to flow, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do the leaders understand the flow of work? So somebody looking after the sales division, do they understand what happens after it leaves their team?
Exactly.
Follow the work through. Yeah. An underwriter, somebody in the risk function, trace it back to where it starts.
There's a classic meme, isn't there, which is computer says no. And I think it's a great example that the frontline staff, the computer says no because somebody further up the food chain has decided there's certain rules built into the system. I remember many years ago doing some work with two building societies. One building society could do an advised mortgage interview, so you had to go through certain parameters. It had to be, some coaching, so on. Hour and a half. The other company, 3 hours. Right, because they'd built all these controls into the system, and it was flawed. It's flawed because the requirements were wrong and the understanding of regulation was wrong.
Straight on.
So it's again a really powerful point, which is understand. Back to purpose, and then understand how that collection of people, process, technology, metrics defines the outcome for the customer. It's that moment of truth that's really important, isn't it? Understanding what the customer's asking for and what we're delivering. How close does that match?
Straight ahead here. So I'm of the view that, like you, I've seen that 90-minute mortgage interview versus 3 hours. And this comes back to the interpretation of regulation to some point. Regulation is really fundamentally about protecting the customer, making sure that the customer is at the heart of everything that you do. If you can prove that you're following the whole customer approach, how the customer is actually engaging with the organization and how you're responding to it, regulation then becomes much easier to manage. I think a lot of organizations where they do over-control, over-regulate themselves, not necessarily understanding how their customer interacts. And that's a shame because they build a business up over so many years and think they know what's going on.
Well, there's a fear as well, isn't there, with regulation? And so belt and braces becomes belt and braces becomes the go-to, doesn't it?
Yes.
Where we're overcompensating in terms of regulation. It's a real challenge.
We could talk about this stuff all day. It's fascinating when you get into businesses, but a lot of businesses all have similar challenges. On the surface, it sounds like they're all different, but it comes down to, in some instances, clarity of that vision, communication, and understanding of the purpose. Right across the business.
Brilliant.
And
that's great.
So that's. I guess everybody needs to have goals in alignment with the strategy ultimately, and you become more productive through that because people are engaged. They'll find blockers in the process and help remove.
That's really helpful. Simon for SRM, DJ, and
DJ extraordinaire. I wish.
Well, you're very good. Stuff you produce, and seasons transformation practitioner. Thank you.
Very welcome. Enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed your ride around Durham.
Driving productivity, performance activity, like business electricity, we're source to infinity.